Hello everyone. I thought it would be a good idea to put together a little guide for us. However, I highly recommend that you check out some of the others on YouTube. I really wanted the curve achievement and I spent hours and hours dying to this boss before finally getting it a little while ago. So I'm just going to highlight some of the key bits that tend to trip up progressing guilds. I find that some of the guides on YouTube tend to make this look very easy, and I wanted to highlight some of the reoccurring areas that seem to trip up all of my other runs. I'm going to focus on phase one only here. Phase one, in my opinion, is a massive step up from generals. I think we need to get to the point where we are consistently getting out of phase one with everybody alive, so therefore we can progress on to the later phases. So all we need to do to get out of phase one is get the boss to 70% health. You then get pulled into the centre of the room and thrown back out again. You get 10 seconds to walk through the mist and reach the circle in the centre of the room. You're then pulled down below and phase two starts. Sounds simple, right? But unfortunately, Sire does make this a little bit harder for us. At the start of the fight, Sire gives everyone 5 stacks of a debuff called Burden of Sin. Whilst it does light ticking damage, around 200 damage every 2 seconds per stack, the main problem is that it slows you down by 20% per stack whilst walking towards Sire in the intermission phase. You need 2 stacks or lower to have enough movement speed to reach the circle in the middle, and anyone still in the mist is one shot. Whilst in the mist, you cannot use spells or abilities, so the whole phase really does revolve around clearing off your stacks. I should highlight that some classes do have a way to cheese this mechanic. For example, Shamans can go into Ghost Wolf just before the boss hits 70%, or as you may have seen, the Druid and Owl group cast Stampeding Roar the instant before we get pulled in. Any speed buffs that you cast just before you are pulled in are not removed. However, I do not recommend that we try and cheese this mechanic. We need everyone alive for the rest of the fight, and it's so easy to accidentally miss this tight window. You clear your stacks for an ability called Cleansing Pain. This is a cone-based attack targeted at the current tank. Unfortunately, the edges of the cone aren't shown, so you have to stack up pretty close to the tank. Everyone inside the cone is hit for a large amount of damage, around about 15k per person, and each person hit spawns a little ad called a Burden of Sin. These little buggers spam an ability which do raid-wide damage, and they cannot be interrupted or CC'd, therefore you need to nuke them down pretty fast if you love your healers at all. So this is the first reason that you cannot just all stack up together within Cleansing Pain and remove your stacks. We would spawn too many ads and they would wipe us pretty quickly with their casts. The second reason we cannot stack up within Cleansing Pain is an ability called Blood Price. This grabs everyone, lifts us in the air and stuns us for around 3.5 seconds. You're then hit for around about 4,000 damage for every person that has the same amount of stacks as you do. As an example, if you were lifted in the air and 10 of people had the same amount of stacks as you did, you would get hit for 40,000 damage, and this would probably kill you. Whereas if only 5 people had the same amount of stacks as you did, you'd have about 20,000 damage, and you could survive this. So we need to drop our stacks systematically, and the easiest way to do this is to split the raid in half, Group A and Group B, with each of the groups standing behind one of the tanks. The tanks then taunt before Cleansing Pain is cast to ensure their half of the raid gets hit. There are many different ways to do this. For example, I've seen Group A and Group B swapping all the way down to 1 or 2 stacks, or some guides recommend using Group A, B, B, A, B. I'm sure we'll use what works for us. Ultimately, each player needs to make sure they have 2 stacks or less before the boss hits 70% health. In total, there will be 6 casts of Cleansing Pain, and you need to remove at least 3 of your stacks to ensure that you have enough movement speed to get to the middle of the room in the intermission phase. I would recommend that everyone keeps an eye on their stacks, and if you accidentally miss one, you should make sure that you stand in the next one to catch up. This is where I highly recommend that each player keeps an eye on their stacks. It really is easy to step slightly outside of the cone and to miss one. You need to be able to react quickly and get your stacks down. The next ability that Sire casts is called Night Hunter. Players that have killed this on normal will remember that this puts a small circle around 2 random DPS players, and 6 seconds later anyone inside the circle takes a large amount of damage and the boss is healed for a very large amount. The players targeted would simply step away from the raid group and the healers would keep them healed up. Unfortunately on Heroic this ability has been changed and made significantly harder. Now, Sire creates 2 copies of himself that charge at the players targeted by the Night Hunter ability after 6 seconds is up. The damage is very high and will easily one-shot the targets, even if they use defensives. However, the copies create a line that they will dash, and the damage is split across everyone in the line, so it's important that we soak the lines. If the lines cross, you cannot stand in the middle, as soaking two of the lines at once will one-shot players. The best way to deal with this mechanic is for the players targeted to not run away. Running away makes soaking the lines very difficult and is a significant DPS loss, especially for the melee classes. The targeted players should quickly move behind the boss and ensure that no other players are within the little circle. Once in position, they should stay still. This will allow for the rest of the raid to soak the lines. It isn't necessary for every single player in the raid to soak the lines. However, the more people in there, it spreads out the damage. So I recommend that you soak as best as you can. So the last ability to talk about before I go into skill order is Ravage. This is cast when Sire Anaphris reaches 100 energy, which takes about 50 seconds. A third of the room is then filled with anima, which does heavy ticking damage to anyone who stands within it and forces you to move. So this ability therefore acts as a DPS race, as after the third Ravage there'll be nowhere else to stand. So we need to get the boss to 70% within 150 seconds, or 2.5 minutes. It is important to understand the order in which Sire will cast abilities, as they're quite close together, and you need to be ready. Luckily, he follows a set format before casting Ravage, and then you move to your new spot, and this repeats. He casts each ability approximately every 10 seconds, and it starts with a Cleansing Pain, then a Night Hunter. The blood price won't hurt as much, as half the raid will have dropped one stack of Burden of Sin in the first Cleansing Pain. Then we get another Cleansing Pain, Night Hunter, and finally a Ravage to move to our new location. This then repeats all three locations before we finally hit 70% and we start the intermission phase. I think the best thing to do now is to highlight some of the areas that my groups in the past have struggled, so we can learn from those experiences. The first one is too many Burden of Sin stacks, so you lack the movement speed to escape from the intermission phase. When we first start this fight, it's very easy to feel overwhelmed. There is a lot going on. The abilities come every 10 seconds and overlap. For example, we'll still be killing the ads when players are targeted by Night Hunter. We'll be killing ads and trying to soak lines at the same time. Therefore, it's incredibly easy to miss a soak. Secondly, players getting one-shot by the Night Hunter mechanic. I've seen this happen quite a lot. Due to the constant ticking damage from stacks, the heavy tank damage from Sire Anaphris, and the ads constantly casting raid-wide AoE damage, and the blood price causing huge bursts, this phase is very hard to heal. We'll get a chance to get some of our mana and cooldowns back later on in the fight. However, this phase is all about healers using everything they can to keep players alive. With a lot going on, it becomes very important to make sure that we all soak the lines. If too many players soak the lines, everyone in the line will get one shot by the mechanic. Third is the soaking of Cleansing Pain, which occurs straight after blood price. As discussed earlier, blood price picks you up, stuns you, and does damage based on the number of players with the same amount of stacks that you have. It also knocks you back as it drops you. The next Cleansing Pain starts to cast the very instant you land, so you need to be super fast to get into position. One way to deal with this mechanic is to stand with your back against the wall before blood price picks you up. Lastly is the DPS requirement. We need to have the boss hit 70% before it casts the third Ravage, else we'll have nowhere to stand and die from the ticking damage on the floor. To start with, we should ignore how much damage we're doing to Sire Anaphris and focus on efficiently dealing with the other mechanics. Once we're comfortable with clearing our stacks, dealing with the ads and the soaks, we can then start to push the DPS, but this cannot be at the expense of the other mechanics. As we get more efficient, we need to be careful that we do not push the boss to 70% too early. We will need the last Cleansing Pain to clear our stacks before we push to the transition phase. I hope that this video has been useful. For me personally, I like to understand why we need to clear our stacks and what effect it has if we don't clear our stacks. So therefore I like to understand the fight and all the mechanics in depth. So I hope that this video has broken down each of the mechanics so we completely understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. Just leaving this now, a tiny bit of footage from the recent kill we killed a few days ago. Phase 3 is insane. It is great fun. You're getting knocked around, you've got things you need to soak, there's places you can't stand, and I'm really looking forward to us getting there. Take care.